The first thing I was going to go over today has to do with precats, and I don't know how many of your libraries use the precat procedure. Basically, it's just the ability to check out something quickly that you don't have time to catalog. So you slap a barcode on it, and it goes out to the patron, and when it comes back, it gets put in a it has a status of cataloging when it comes back, and basically it's a item that's not really attached to a particular bib, and so in order to get it moved over to a bib, there's a couple ways to handle it. Um, some library staff may just delete the temporary item and then bring in the bib and then create the item from scratch, but you lose circulations with that method. And then the second method is to basically transfer that temporary item over to a regular bib. So I was just going to go through that process. I have a book that's not in the system. I'm going to give it a fake barcode since I don't have any barcodes handy. So I'm just going to check out a book with a barcode called Precat 1, and hopefully nobody has used that barcode. Otherwise, I'll be checking it out. Okay, so barcode Precat 1 was either misscanned or a non-cataloged item. Do you want to check it out as a pre-cataloged item? So this is like circulation type stuff, but I wanted to create the example that we can then catalog. So I'm going to say pre-cataloged, enter my title. Author. Okay, so I've checked it out to my record. And now I'm going to go ahead and check it in. Okay, item needs to be routed to cataloging. Okay, so now we can get out of my account. And at this point, if I go into item status and type in that barcode, you can see that there's this temporary item that has a location of stacks. It's got a status of cataloging. And so I'm ready to actually catalog this book in the system. And I did find it in Z39.50, so I'm just going to bring in a record from there. Make sure it's not horrible, even though we're not going to keep it forever. Okay. On import. Okay. Can you see that any better screen size-wise? No, still very small? Okay. All right, let me make an adjustment here. Okay, how about that? Let's see. So Ellen and Tracy, have you seen a difference in the screen size?
Have you changed to the screen?
Oh, to the item status screen or the Z39.50?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
it.
Okay. So I'm seeing it bigger on my screen.
Yes, it looks much bigger.
Okay. All right. So, all right. So did I click on import or did I take a break here to?
Yeah, that's the screen I was looking for.
Okay. All right. So we've got import.
Okay, so but that screen is still small. Your other screen changed, but this one has not.
Okay. Let me see. Okay. So it may just be the Z39.50 window that's smaller because this one seems pretty big. So I've got a record that I've imported. And now I'm ready to transfer my temporary item over to it. So I go to holdings maintenance. And I have to go down to, let's see, what should be the owning library for this? I guess it will temporarily be Baker because I'm logged in as a Baker workstation. And I'm going to click on add volumes. I have no idea what the call number is for this. It's giving me a suggested one, so I'm just going to take it because this is just an example anyway. So SHR and my I don't want to put in a barcode at this point because I just want to create my volume, and I'm going to just click on edit then create, and because I didn't put a barcode in there, it just created a volume or a call number record for me. If I click on this, right click or go to actions for selected rows, I can mark this volume as an item transfer destination. And I'm doing that because I want to transfer my temporary Precat item over to this particular bib. Now I'm going to go back over to item status where I had my item listed. And under actions for cataloger, I can transfer this item to previously marked volume. Okay, I can see that this is the right record that I want to transfer to, so I'm going to click on transfer. It says items transferred. And if I come back over here to my bib record and I click on refresh, you'll see that I now have my item here underneath a volume. I can click on it and either right-click or go up to Actions for selected row and click on Edit Items to give it all the settings that I want to. Change it to an available status, change it to, let's see, nonfiction new, click Apply, set it as a book. Anyway, this will be different for each of you. And I don't really have to go through all these settings since I'm just going to delete this item anyway, but for the sake of the example, I thought it would be good. Okay, click on Modify Copies, and now I've completed cataloging this temporary item under a regular bib. Any questions? Was the screen size sufficient to be able to follow along? I'm using my new computer. I thought with adjusting those settings, I'd be able to use this one rather than my old one. So how do you get the barcode in now? Well, see, I used a fake barcode. Normally, your barcode would already be associated with this temporary item, and that would be the barcode that would stay with this item all the way from the precat to the full cataloging. And so that's why mine looks strange, and yes, it shouldn't be precat 1. It would just be whatever. I didn't have barcodes like you do in your cataloging section, so I had to improvise and come up with a text barcode. But yes, normally that would be a real barcode. I could click on this and then come down here and replace the barcode. If for some reason the barcode got lost or I needed to give it a different barcode, I could with the replace barcode. So, but since this is going to go away, don't need to do that. Any other questions before we move on?
This is Ellen. Can
Hi.
you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Sometimes we get just a screen that comes up with a couple lines on the top, like where up says title Duprel 7, author Rick Shreves. And then there'll be just a line, and below the line it's blank. If you get that, how can you get to that item status screen?
Okay, I'm confused.
I guess you would open item status and then put the barcode in, huh?
Yeah, that's how I start. I look at that, and that gives me a clue as to. Let me display this again. Its status and that's where I start, and it gives me the title and author. Plus, by the time the book comes back in from the being checked out, it'll be there in front of you, and you can actually catalog it at that point. But yeah, I usually have both tabs open. My item status screen and then my other tab for the book that I'm trying to bring in. And it might already be in the system by then because maybe it was a new book and popular with other libraries, and somebody else might have cataloged it in the interim. I had done a search before we got together and found that this book wasn't in the system already. So that's why I went to Z39.50 from the get-go, because I'd already searched Sage.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. So my microphone was fading out. Is it okay now, John? Not sure what the deal was.
Yeah, it's fine now. Just for some reason it seemed to be fading out.
So. Okay. All right, so so that was kind of a quick Precat example, and it doesn't come up a lot, and I didn't know whether it's because everybody knew how to do it, but I thought it wouldn't be a bad thing to cover, just in case somebody didn't know how to do it. So let me close some of these tabs. Okay. So something I talked about the possibility of going over authority records, because I just made an authority update, our annual update, where we send them a current copy of our database, and they send us a back of changes. And so I've updated the bib records, and I wanted to let you know that. And a question that came up via email, and this is something I've been wondering about. Let's see if I can can you guys see this screen okay?
Not real well.
Not real well? Okay. Let me see.
No.
Does it change with making this screen smaller? Is that any better?
Not really.
Okay. Okay. You know, for the next session, we may need to go back to the other. Oh, thought we had a solution here. I don't know of another way. Workstation administration.
Is there any way we can do it from our own computers? I'm not seeing a way, but
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to see if adjusting the font size makes a difference here. Save to disk. Okay, and then I'm going to need to bring up that. Catherine, can you tell me the title of that book again that you sent me as an example? Just remember the author. Okay.
There, it was called Bunnies for Tea.
Yes. Okay, so we have bunnies for tea. And the question was, oftentimes in Z39.50 now, when we're bringing in records, and I went ahead and added these back in, Catherine, because I wanted to have an example to show folks, and I also wanted to experiment with how it interacts with authority links that we have. So, bunnies for tea, and if we click on Mark Edit, oh, there we go. That's really big. All right. But you guys can see it now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay, so we might have to go somewhere in the middle here, but for now, at least you guys can see. Yeah, aren't having to strain your eyes. So with the news, with the Z39.50, lots of times you'll see this. The trouble with this is it's cutting off the subfields. Let's try something else. Okay, larger than default. Do we want to try medium? And go back to retrieve. That's what I was going to retrieve last record. Okay, Yeah, that's better. Still big,
Mm-hmm.
but it shows the subfields, so much better. Okay, so what we're seeing in Z39.50 a lot nowadays is this subfield 0 with a link to the authority name reference on Library of Congress. And it's good information. There's no problem with it. What I was concerned about initially, and I would delete these on import, was how it was going to work with authority checking that we do within our own system. And so I did some authority links in this system. One of the things I first looked up was to see whether subfield 0 is repeatable. And it is repeatable according to cataloging rules. So we can have more than one subfield 0 in the record and be following standards. And what I did was I actually did authority linking on this record to come up with the SAGE ID of our authority record for these subjects. And so you see both of them in the record, and they're going to be able to coexist together just fine. So I did all of that just to find out, at least give some guidance on, can we leave these in the system and it's okay? And the answer is yes. So you don't need to worry about stripping them out of the record. You can leave them in there, and it won't interfere with any authority checking that we're doing on our own system. And one of the things that I did notice up here on the author entry, that there's a link to the Library of Congress name heading, but there's no subfield 0 for SAGE. And I thought, well, that's strange. And then I went over to the Manage Authorities link underneath cataloging. It's Manage Authorities. And what I did was I did a search for that author's name. The other thing I could have done is back in the record, I could have right-clicked on it to see if it came up with an entry for Kate Stone. And you look at the list, and there is no Kate Stone with that particular birth date. And so it just so happens that we don't have an authority record in the system yet for this particular author, and that's why it couldn't come up with a subfield 0 for SAGE. I actually went out and grabbed the authority record so I could import it now. Okay. And this isn't something you're going to have to do. I just want to kind of show you that what happens once we get an authority record in there. And okay, downloads. I'm thinking it's this one. Okay. So records in the Q1, imported one. If I wanted to look at the mark, nope, this is not the right one. Okay. So we'll go back to import. I'm going to look at minimize this and look at my downloads here. So it was a record 2 that I downloaded. Okay. I just realized my mic was muted. If we come back to this record and right-click on it again, we now, well, there we go. We now see a Stone Kate, 1984. Normally, I wouldn't have to download these records. We periodically send out our new records to LTI, and they send us back the changes. But if we needed to add an authority record right away, we could. And this is how I would do it. So now this record's in the system, and I can go ahead and apply the full authority. And that did wipe out the other subfield 0. But if I do it via the database, when I'm updating these links, it doesn't get rid of that 0. So that's something I didn't know about.
Beth?
Yes.
What if your Kate Stone had not been in the Library of Congress records either? Like she just isn't in the system at all for some reason.
That just means that there'd be no authority record for her, and that's okay.
Okay.
It's just that we want to make sure that we're using the right record, and if there is one, we'd like to establish that authority relationship. But when I'm running the linking program on the database to develop these subfield zeros, if it doesn't find a matching entry, it just doesn't add a subfield 0. And it's not a big deal to the system, but it does the authority records help keep us consistent. But searching and everything else is still going to work fine.
Okay. And if you have somebody with kind of a common name like Kate Stone, what if you can't figure out which one it is?
Okay, that's a good question. And if there's an authority record, the authority record itself usually gives some information. I'm back to this Manage Authorities table, and I'm going to submit it again, and you should see the new, now we see Kate 1984, and okay, let me see, back here, if I right-click, and we see this record. I'm trying to think of an easy way for you to view the contents, because we really don't want to edit it. You can look at it in the Library of Congress. Right here, I'm going to click on Edit so you can see what the record looks like. And this same content will be on the Library of Congress website, and we'll go there in just a minute. So in the record itself, it lists some books that are associated with this particular author.
Okay.
And so that'll give you an indication because you'll be able to tell, oh yeah, the same Kate Stone that wrote this book is the same one that wrote the book that I have, that kind of thing. So if we come over to the web, okay, let me click. Okay, so I had done a search on the Library of Congress authorities, And that's how I grabbed this record in the first place, because it gives me the ability to download a MARC record for the authority. And so the same thing that we saw on our system is what is here on the Library of Congress Authority's website. Okay. Okay, any questions regarding that kind of authority procedure? Like I said, a lot of this happens in the background, but I just thought it would be helpful for you to know what those links in the record are all about.
And so to reiterate, when we come across a record that has a bunch of them in there, we just leave them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of that is the start of what's called linked data. It means, it's tying information about that particular author or that particular subject to the record and potentially gives us more information. So I don't think it's a bad thing. It's just figuring out how we're going to utilize it in the future.
Okay.
Another example here, I didn't come up with a SAGE link for this particular subject, afternoon teas, and that's because it's not a subject authority in our system at this point. But I could go out to Library of Congress and download this afternoon teas subject as well. It's just one of those things where we will be quarterly sending out new records to LTI, so it'll catch it then.
What if you have a subject that you can't find in SAGE or Library of Congress authorities? We talked about this a little bit before, but do you have to find something even if it's just a close approximation in the authorities, or can you go ahead and make something up that doesn't exist?
Yeah, unfortunately, we're not supposed to make something up. So we have to get close. There are other. Library of Congress is the one we rely on the most. And, but there are other, I'm sure that you've been seeing as you catalog FAST subjects from OCLC, where they have their own list of subjects. A lot of them overlap with Library of Congress, and in that case, I'd prefer Library of Congress. But yeah, it's one of those things, if we all started making them up, then we wouldn't have the consistency that we need in the catalog for patrons doing subject searches. Because we might have a different term than somebody else would for the same thing, and it would split things up for searching. So that's why we have to kind of stick with a fixed vocabulary.
Yeah, that makes sense. Speaking of rabbits, it's easy to go down a rabbit hole looking for some of this stuff.
Yes, it is.
Pretty soon, 15, 20 minutes has passed and you still don't know where you are.
Yeah, and it does help to search this, either our system or WorldCat, for books that are similar and see what subjects they used, because then you're not wasting as much time trying to figure out, okay, what's the term that I'm looking for. And if you do a keyword search, then it's not limited to subject, and then you can look at the subjects in it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Because yes, it's very easy to get caught on the rabbit trail. Any other questions about authority records?
Beth, could you show how you choose or find the juvenile subject rather than the adult? There's just the regular fiction, the juvenile fiction. I know that sometimes they're different, so how do you differentiate that when you're searching on the Library of Congress?
Oh, when you're searching on Library of Congress, okay, rather than in our system. All right, let's hop out. Okay, so the thing with subject authorities, basically, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong because I'm not an expert on this, but the individual parts of the record, let's hop back over to our record here. So rabbits is an authorized heading all by itself. And then the juvenile fiction is just a classification of that. And so you don't need to find these two together in the authorities. Does that make sense?
Yes, I didn't understand that, so I appreciate the clarity.
No, and it's a good question because, and we do have rabbits, 1780 to 1790, they have all these breakdowns. But you notice that there's no, we have authorized headings over here. Okay, so that means this rabbits as laboratory animals, that is an authorized subject. And this one is an authorized. Okay. And if we go to the
So you're saying that that authority can be used for adult and for juvenile?
Correct.
Because juvenile is just the form.
Yes.
Thank you.
And so I clicked on that authorized heading for rabbits, and I'm looking to see if this 85110203 matches the one that they gave us over here. No. Curious. So if I type this in the web browser, I'm still learning about these particular links and their application in the system. So, okay, so this actually is Rabbit's juvenile fiction.
Oh.
So let's go back over to here. Go back. So if we go all the way down, keep on scrolling. There's lots of breakdowns of rabbits. Rabbit's juvenile literature is an authorized heading, and Rabbit's juvenile fiction is an authorized heading.
That's where my confusion comes in.
Yeah. So, and we also have Rabbit's fiction, but it doesn't look as if it has that authorized heading. LC annotated children's catalog subject headings. So I guess
this is the rabbit hole I was talking about.
Yep.
Literally. So you're looking for, in the far right column, you're looking for something that says Library of Congress subject heading?
You're looking for authorized heading.
Okay.
And as Heather indicated in the chat, a lot of this you don't have to worry about because if you click on, let's go back over to the catalog, and I'm going to choose a different record, possibly. Okay, I'm just going to do a search, open up a new, and I'm just going to type in rabbits. I'm just going to get a new record. Okay. All right, so we have baby animals here. Click on edit. Okay, we can click on the validate tag. Now I noticed that this record already has some subfield zeros in, so it's had some authority linking done to it already. One of the things I learned at the Evergreen conference was that if you click on the validate button and there's already subfield zeros, it just ignores them. So it's not going to change anything, but we do notice that this particular one, because it shows in red, is not considered an authorized heading. So we could go back to Library of Congress and look at this. Okay, either it's not authorized. Let me make a note on that. It's either not authorized or it's not an authority record in our system. So it could be a valid authority record, a valid subject heading, but we just haven't loaded the authority record for it. So there's a couple different cases. Okay, and Heather, I noticed it's usually just missing the V tag or the V subfield. Yeah. So we can go back to Library of Congress and look at, that was Rabbit's infancy. And you see that Rabbit's infancy doesn't have an authorized heading next to it.
Well, what's the difference between authorized heading and Library of Congress subject heading, since they're both Library of Congress headings?
Yeah, it just means that it's not an authorized heading. So animals infancy is, but rabbit's infancy is not at this point. It doesn't mean that they won't at some point make it an authorized heading. Let me look at C. Okay, what if we change this to a 1? Let me go back over here. Because it was listing Rabbit's Infancy Juvenile Fiction Library of Congress subject headings. All right, anybody know the answer? I think I'm going to have to take another subject heading class.
That was where my confusion comes in on to how to figure out what is authorized.
So rabbit's juvenile fiction is, but not the rabbit's infancy. And Heather's saying, I think as long as infancy can be placed under those subjects, it's still correct. Hmm. Okay, well, John and I are going to do some more research on this. Not all combinations of things can be mentioned in LOC because it would be too hard. That's why there's floating subdivisions, and yes, that's true. The more subdivisions you add, the more chance it's not going to be showing up with an authorized heading because there's too many combinations. So I wouldn't think that there's anything wrong with this. I feel like if you see it on Library of Congress, even though it doesn't have an authorized heading, I think it would be okay to add it.
Okay, this is Tracy again. I had another question. When you validated that back up that screen,
Yeah.
it took off the juvenile fiction because you changed the
No,
0 to a 1.
I actually took
Or
it off.
did you? Oh, okay. Gotcha.
So that was my
Okay.
fault.
Okay,
I was trying things, and I thought, it's not going to hurt to try and see. So I'll put it back because it's okay to have it. So I put it back to a 0, and I added the juvenile fiction back. And I'll go ahead and save the record. Click on validate. And yeah, same thing. So yeah, I'll see if I can find a good subject authority tutorial that we can all watch together, or I can send out a link, something to that effect. And we'll figure out what all these subdivisions mean as far as with the validate tag or the validate tab. And let me go back to here. And let's look at that infancy tag again. So it lists both infancy juvenile fiction and infancy juvenile literature. And it does say that they're a Library of Congress subject heading. So I'm going to say that it's okay to use it if you see it here.
Thank you.
And don't worry about it. If you click on that validate tab and it shows in red, if you saw it here, then we're good to go. Like I said, it's just because that particular combination doesn't have an authorized heading, but individually those are considered okay, and so we can group them. And yeah, I figure that's unless we hear different or learn different, I feel like that's a good way to proceed, and consider it a valid heading if you see it here. I'm looking for an example of a C instead, because sometimes those are in there and they'll give you a clue of a different direction to go. But maybe I actually have to search for the wrong term and then it tells you. Okay, Heather's clarifying. You shouldn't use the subject heading if it has a reference tag next to it, though. Do you have an example, Heather? Rabbit's moon. Greed. Okay, let's look up greed. Okay, so there's two different ones. An authorized heading and one that's a reference. It's not the same for both juvenile and adult. So you can see that the LC annotated children's catalog subject headings has an authorized heading. So it's only used for juvenile subject heading. And the juvenile subject headings are those that are a 650, a second indicator 1. We have greed drama and greed, okay, and greed fiction. So those would be okay. As Heather indicated, if we click on the reference link, it says to see avarice. So you get a bigger word if you're dealing with adult materials. Does that make sense? Thanks for that example, Heather. That's what I was looking for. Okay, I think I've caught up with all the chat messages. Any other questions or concerns about authority records? Okay, well, we can sign off for today. It's already been, wow, where did time go? It's almost been an hour. So I guess if you have any further questions, reach out by email or phone. And I hope everybody has a great day.
Thanks, Beth.